Matters. This webinar is part of the Law Awareness Weeks at CDC2021, a collaboration between Law Society, Pro Bono Services, the 5 CDCs, NUS Faculty of Law, SUSS School of Law, SMU School of Law, and the Singapore Corporate Counsel Association Pro Bono Chapter, supported by the People's Association. My name is Amira, and I am the moderator chairing this session. First, some housekeeping matters for us all to take note of. Please feel free to ask questions at any time during the webinar using the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your Zoom window. We'll do our best to address your questions during or at the end of the talk. There will be a QR code featured in the slides for you to scan to access the handouts made available for this webinar. A link will also be sent to you in the follow-up email sent to you tomorrow. Please note that the discussion and any material provided in this webinar is not intended to substitute or constitute as professional legal advice. So you should consult a lawyer if you require specific legal advice. Now, let me introduce our panel for today. Samuel is the Managing Director of Yuen Law LLC, an award-winning Singapore law practice specializing in legal issues relating to startups and emerging companies, and the head of its corporate practice group. Since starting his practice in 2001, Samuel has gained a reputation as a creative but pragmatic practitioner of the law, who is able to provide effective legal solutions. Samuel is also active in the local business and charitable communities, and had spent his time outside of work with his only daughter. Aisha, my second panelist, has accumulated 6 years of freelancing experience as a design practitioner and has worked with a range of companies including startups, agencies, government institutions, and high net worth individuals. Aside from providing design services, she has also been contracted to be a design trainer for learning institutions. Her professional expertise includes user research, design strategy, communications design, and user experience design. She's currently a senior product designer at Intelex. Samuel and Aisha, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So before we get started with our session, we want to do 2 short polls to understand our audience better. So let's have the poll. And you should be seeing a poll for all of you on Zoom. The first poll question is, what stage of the freelancing journey are you on? So you can choose the first, second, or third option. And you can continue with the second question. Which industry or category does your home-based business belong to? And you have 5 options here. So we'll give a bit of time for you to record your response. And I believe that we should have our responses. Okay, so you probably can see, or if you can't, I'm going to read it out to you. So the first question, what stage of the freelancing journey are you on? And 79% of our participants today said that they are still considering becoming a freelancer. So hopefully today's session is going to give you a better impression and perspective on whether this is the right path for you. And 11%, tied together with those who have just started within the past 6 months, are already a freelancer. So we have 22% who are already freelancers. So that is quite good. And hopefully, you know, these questions that you'll be sending to us in the Q&A platform, you're going to be sharing with us some thoughts on your journey and also what you would like to know in order to be a better freelancer. And the second question, which industry category does your home-based business belong to? This is useful because now we know how many of you belong to which category. And the biggest one is others, because you're not in the other 4 options, but it's good that we know that 25% of you are in food-related business. So we'll be sure to try to deal with the perspectives from a food-related side. A good significant proportion of you are in handcrafts related business. So this is also interesting. We're going to try to make sure we deal with some handcrafts related business in our responses, and bearing that category in mind as well. Okay, so let's close this poll. Now, to give our audience a sense of what to expect, I want to outline first what we're going to be discussing in the next 1.5 hours. So our first part of this webinar, we're going to be talking about setting up your home office or home-based business. We're going to be dealing with whether you need to register, should you register, what about registration and permits. So this is going to be useful for the lot of you that are still thinking of becoming a freelancer. The second part to our webinar, we will be talking about marketing, some considerations from a practical aspect, as well as maybe charging considerations in case you need to have some tips on how to charge your potential customers. The next part to our session, we're going to be dealing with contracts, because we've been advertising this session to be dealing with contracts. So we're definitely going to be spending a good time talking about some contractual issues and concerns that you may face or you may already be facing. The last part that we will be focusing on is regarding IP protection. IP stands for intellectual property, and we'll be dealing a bit on this topic. It's quite a huge topic, but we will still try to do our best to touch a good amount of coverage in order to address where it could affect you and your rights as a freelancer. So let's get started. Now, before we launch into our conversation today, we started with a poll, but I would like to share some figures on the self-employed community that we have in Singapore. And I always find that looking at statistics are quite useful. So I found a March 2018 report by the Manpower Research and Statistics Department, which track self-employed persons engaged in trade or business without hiring any paid workers for about a year. And within a year, there was an approximately 11% increase in the number of residents involved in such work. Now, if we did a study today, I'm very sure that this number is going to double, especially with the pandemic situation today. And so with this advent, and also because 75% of you are saying that you want or you are thinking about becoming a freelancer, it's quite important for us to focus on this freelancing economy. And for some reason, it's quite interesting that the legal requirements surrounding home businesses are not always fully addressed and thought of. So we're going to be asking a few questions to our panelists for the different segments. And I'm going to start the question and answer part with my panelists with a very basic question. And I'm going to start with you, Sam. So Sam, if someone tells you they want to run a business from home, what kind of permits and licenses would one need to operate that home-based business? And I just want to put it out here that in terms of context, that there are 2 schemes to do so. So you can tell us the schemes and maybe you can explain and distinguish so that we know the difference between the 2. Sam?
All right, thank you so much, Amira. Good evening, everyone. And well, let me just start off with the classic lawyer answer. It depends. The kind of permits and licenses that you require for your home-based business depends on that kind of home-based business. Yeah, so I know it's frustrating, okay, but it really depends on what you are trying to do. If you are into distribution and sale of alcohol, then of course you need an alcohol license from the police, right? If you are doing selling epok-epok, you probably just need your regular SFA food handler's license, and if you are intending on making it halal, of course, MUIS has to come in and make sure that you have a halal setup. Yeah. So what is the difference then? Of course, Amira correctly mentioned that there are two broad schemes in Singapore, the home office scheme and the home-based business scheme. So let me just shorten it to just the office scheme and the business scheme. Yeah. Now, it doesn't matter who approves because the rules are exactly the same, no matter who is the approving authority. And you can either go to HDB if you live in a HDB flat, or if you stay in private housing, landed or condominiums, you go to URA for approval. Yeah. So what's the big difference here? Okay, the big difference here is that under the home office scheme, you are regulated. Okay, you need to seek prior approval. Whereas for the business scheme, you do not need to seek approval. Why is that so? Okay, because of the differentiation that the government has created between the types of businesses. Now, you need to get approval because in an office scheme, you are entitled to have up to 2 non-resident employees. Okay, that means they don't live with you. Whether they are related to you or not is not important. The fact is they are not registered occupiers of that property. Whereas for the business scheme, you are not allowed to have any non-resident employees. So the people that work on your business must live with you. And for example, if you are doing something and your kids are, now they are having the holidays or in between HBL, they got nothing better to do and they tell you they're bored, get them to do some stuff for you, and that's perfectly fine. Of course, I'm not commenting on child labor laws here, yeah. But this is actually quite a correct reflection of my own personal childhood as well. Maybe Amira, you can tell them more about that later. Okay, other differences. You cannot you cannot apply for home office scheme if you don't fall under certain types of businesses. And these businesses are usually professional services. So, for example, you must either be offering something like accounting, architectural, consultancy-based businesses. You can be offering design advertising services, doing your insurance or financial planning services as well. Of course, all these are subject to regulatory approvals and permits from the specific industries. So long as these activities, firstly, of course, they cannot be illegal. You cannot be offering massages of the joyful conclusion variety. You cannot be doing weird things, noxious things as well. But generally speaking, if the bulk of your work is paper-based, it is not requiring you to cook up a storm or to create things or to move goods in and out. It is very likely that it will fall under the home office scheme. Yeah. Now, on the other hand, unregulated, but it is also restricted to certain types of businesses. Okay, the home-based business scheme is open to F&B businesses, such as a small-scale baking, like what I mentioned, my favorite apple, you auntie fry the apple and go and sell it to a cafe or something, right? Hairdressing, facial, beauty, pedicure, manicure, private tuition for not more than 3 students at a go. This is not related to the pandemic. This rule has always been there. Sewing services, right? If you work as a seamstress or as a part-time tailor, that's possible. If you work as a freelance artist, journalist, photographer, or writer, yeah. Now, you find that in both cases, right, you must actually be a flat owner, a registered occupier, or a tenant of the premises. Yeah. So if you are not, then sorry, it doesn't apply to you. And one other important thing, in both cases, both schemes, you must be using that place as a place of residence as well. Yeah. Now, one common question we get is this: do I need to can I put up advertising or signages or posters? The answer is no, you cannot do that, right? So do make sure that if you put up a huge neon sign advertising your superior apples, then that is actually contrary to what is allowed by URA and HDB. Now, very important, okay, if you are setting up a home office scheme, you need prior consent from the owners of the premises. Yeah, so if you happen to be one owner, you need the other owner to agree as well. Can you store goods in a home office? No, actually you can't. However, if you have a home business scheme, or you are under a home business scheme, you may in fact store goods, right? However, do note that the nuisance laws do apply. And if there's high volume of traffic, or maybe there's a lot of banging, or there's a lot, okay, banging as in the audio variety, all right? Let's not stray. No extraneous traffic must be introduced to the site, and there should not be adverse impact to the neighborhood and living environment. Yeah. So if you have this bunch of people that are always coming up and making a lot of noise, your neighbors can complain, and your neighbors can actually get you suspended. Yeah. Okay, so make sure that there's also no smoke, noise, smell, litter, effluent, or dust, right? So if you're thinking of becoming a home-based carpenter, please do not do so. Yeah. All right. Yeah, some common things are required. You typically need to comply with the fire safety and shelter department conditions. Okay, so the standards here is that you need a 8A or 34B ABC dry chemical powder fire extinguisher. Okay, these are the kinds that you can get from the DIY shops. You also need a single station smoke detector. Okay, at least currently that's what they're saying. It can be battery operated and no wiring is required. Again, you can get it from your friendly neighborhood DIY shops. One last thing I want to say about the commonality or the differences is under the current situation, all right, you need safe entry. So yeah, it's funny, right? You go home and you scan, before you step into the house. Yeah, and of course, you don't have to be fully vaccinated if you are not, but you do have to do the safe entry thing. All right, Amira, back to you.
Thanks, Sam. That's a very comprehensive overview. Halfway, I felt that I should be taking down notes. So I hope our audience are taking some bullet points, because it's really quite tough to determine what kind of regulations could apply depending on the business and the industry you're in, and then the additional requirements as well with the current safe management measures in place. So that was quite a fair bit, Sam, but I want you to also address this part on business registration. So can we start a business at home without a business registration? Because it's already going to cost a lot of money to do all the smoke and the fire extinguishers, So must our audience register with ACRA as a business? And, consider as well if our friends are in home baking or giving private tuition, right? It's really going to be quite administrative. Yeah. So can we?
You may, but again, you might not want to. So registration with under the Business Registration Act is a must, right? So you have to go to ACRA, you have to duly register your business there. Again, you wonder, if I'm just starting this and just trying out a bit, just trying to get used to it. It's organic, right? And sometimes, if you're just, trying it out, just a trial thing, I think it's fine. There's a gray area here, but generally speaking, if you have made up your mind to launch into this business, please register. Yeah. I don't think, you could actually run a business long-term without registration. Yeah.
Okay. So Sam says, go register. I'm gonna ask Aishah now. Aishah, you were doing freelancing design for 6 years. So did you register your business with ACRA, and were you under the home office scheme? Okay, let's say you didn't. Any problems with not registering?
I'm not gonna contradict what Sam said. Sam is correct to say that business is organic, and I think just for myself, I've been a very experimental person, freelancing even over so many years, from being a trainer to being a researcher to being a graphic designer to being an experienced designer So in that light, I have to, share with everybody that I did not register a business as a private limited. Neither did I apply for the home office scheme, mainly because I did not employ people under me. So I have always been an independent contractor. It makes me a lot more nimble. It gives me the flexibility to work with different clients and not have to worry about bottom line. And if I do need help, if the workload is a little bit too much, I've always relied on subcontracting work. So I would subcontract work to a copywriter, I would subcontract work to an illustrator, if the design work is very large. And and mind you, when I subcontract work to very capable people, not that I need to manage them like to the T. They know what they're doing, and I trust them. And it was easy for me to just subcontract work without having to, employ them and say, you have to work with me for longer term. It was really pretty much on a project by project basis. Yeah.
Let me just jump in here. I think Siti did not break, Aishah did not break the law on this, okay, because she brought up a very pertinent point. She did not, employ any persons to work with her. Now, why is this important? Maybe I'll phrase it the other way around. How different is having home office from working from home? Right? So long as you are the one doing the work by yourself, there is really no issue here, okay? So, however, registration of a business is something which is strongly encouraged, okay? And of course, the law says you have to. But again, I've seen so many cases where people just try a little, dip their toes in it, or they do something they love, like baking sourdough bread, and just, before they know it, they are in it, So things can happen that way, and there is a fluidity to it. Of course, earlier I mentioned the gray area, and I think so long as you have decided, you ought to. Yeah, maybe that should be the takeaway.
Yeah, actually, I want to chime in as well to what Samuel said. Once you're very clear of your business services and you know roughly what your business plan is, and you are on the road to employing people, then definitely think about registering. Because I was still toying around different kinds of business models, or coming up with different kind of pitches to different clients. I did get questioned from some clients like, hey, you're not registered. It's going to be difficult for us to work with you because you're not really like an official vendor, or you're not on our preferred list. So building a reputation through registering a business could help if you're really thinking about scaling your services. So I would also really encourage that once you're very clear about your business plan.
Right. So register if the law requires you to, because, for example, if you're hiring somebody, then you've got to pay them, and you have to also do the CPF contributions and all of that. So since I just started on CPF, I'm going to ask about three things: income tax, GST, and CPF. Okay, we just love paying taxes to government, and we need to know when and how and what's going to happen, right? Because we're responsible for ourselves as a freelancer. So I'm going to ask Sam, and then Aishah, you can jump in, with any thoughts and comments on that. So any tax issues, so something very broad, any tax issues or concerns arising from being self-employed. So any do's and don'ts. So I think we want to have some tips on what we should do and what kind of pitfalls to avoid. Some quick comments on GST. Should we register? I think this would be a quick one, right? If you have a business, you register,
nothing
right?
is ever quick, right? It depends. GST registration up to a certain point is a voluntary act. Of course, if you register GST, there is a flow through of your taxes, or your GST, sorry, and you do end up paying only the net amount. Yeah. Of course, that means that every month, every quarter, you got to do your GST reporting. And that can be quite daunting for someone who's just starting out. However, if you do not charge GST, you end up absorbing all the GST that you pay for, right? So if you, the bottom line is if you are making less than $1 million turnover, GST registration is not mandatory. And let me clarify, it's 1 million in a 12-month moving window. Yeah. Okay. So that's just one sentence or one paragraph on GST.
Okay, how about the tax part? Any income tax issues, do's and don'ts?
Okay, the reason why I went to law is because I can't count for nuts. But if you have any serious tax questions, I always recommend that you speak with a tax agent, or maybe speak with someone who does accounts for their firms. So maybe if you want some references, I do not mind sharing my contacts. Just let Law Society know about it. Now, if you talk about taxation, right, again, the issue is this. If you are working in the business, okay, of course, it's considered personal income, right? You're taxed on your personal income as well. Yeah, but of course, the regime is a bit different from when you are an employee. First of all, if you are doing your own business, you register yourself as a sole proprietor, you are actually considered to be self-employed, okay? Freelancers are in fact considered to be self-employed, and different rules will apply. That's all I can really say about it because I'm not a tax expert. But I would go as far as to say that if you are concerned about taxation, well, think of it this way. If it's a small amount, it usually, if your turnover is small, it's usually not an issue. Yeah, but if you want to do it properly, do contact and speak with a tax agent, a local tax agent who preferably is qualified to practice as an accountant as well. So usually they give great, cheap advice. Yeah, back to you, Amira.
Thanks, Sam. I'm gonna let Aishah jump in on this tax and the GST issue before we come into CPF.
Yeah, of course. Because I'm not, I haven't been registered, so my prices are usually a little bit more competitive as compared to if a client were to work with agencies. So that's one good point. However, I think with regards to personal income tax, IRS has always been on top of all my income that's flowing into my account. Somehow they know everything, and they have asked me to link my tax deduction through Gyro, and I have duly done that as well. So every time they just deduct it automatically. I don't really have to worry. I just have to review the statement and then just make sure that it's correct according to the kind of income that I'm getting from businesses.
Thanks. No one's saying that you're evading. No. We're going to move away from this sensitive tax issue to CPF. So I'm going to give an example. Say we have someone who is 57 years old, right? The question is, can that person contribute CPF from his or her income, and will it be okay, never mind, no need to mention about tax. Okay, can you contribute to CPF?
Yes, I think the short answer is yes. Do note that self-employed persons or SEPs may actually enjoy tax reliefs on their mandatory and voluntary CPF contributions, which is also based on their annual net trade income. So that's the technical phrasing for it, right? But do note that if you are in NTI, your net trade income is negative or zero, you are actually not entitled to tax relief. Yeah. So that is the answer. If you're whatever age you are at, I don't think it's an issue. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I think we have covered quite a good ground on setting up and permits and some of these ancillary issues on a compliance. So I'm gonna do a very quick round of can I do this and that, and you can answer can, cannot, and you tell me why. So I'm going to be firing away right now. Aishah, can I bring in an industrial size oven into my kitchen?
No, it's going to make so much noise. It's going to cause so much heat.
You need to say cannot.
Oh, cannot.
Okay, we try again one more time. Aishah, can I buy a firewood oven, because you know they can make nicer pizzas, and put in my balcony?
No.
Okay. This cannot. Okay, but why not?
I think firewood ovens may cause a lot of smoke. I think that's something that I notice, especially in restaurants, they have the proper ventilator and stuff, so it's fine. But I don't think at home you have that.
Okay, Sam, your time. Can I make stinky tofu from my kitchen? There's no fumes, nothing.
Sometimes can, sometimes cannot. Right, let me explain. If you are living in a HDB flat, I am very sure not everyone would appreciate the chou tofu, all right, the stinky tofu. However, if you are living in a swanky area, in a good class bungalow, and you're separated by a fair distance from everyone else, they might not even smell your stinky tofu. So make a way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it depends, right?
It depends.
Okay, Aishah, one more round for you. Can I be a pet groomer and have pets sent to my house for grooming? Because pets are so cute.
Depends. Now I'm learning. How many people are coming in and out of the house? Is it causing a lot of noise in the corridors? Is it causing a lot of those fur, you know, that drops out of the animals?
Okay, and last one. I think this is very easy. Sam, can I start a food business at home and not be subjected to the same hygiene regulations as a shop? Because my kitchen is very, very clean, even cleaner than the hawker centers.
I'm going to say it depends. No, but the answer is no, cannot. All right. Why do we need this kind of licenses? You know, why do we need it? It's really to ensure the public that you have what you say you have, right? And also going for the food handlers license course ensures that you are up to speed on the latest standards of hygiene that should apply to food handlers. So having a clean kitchen doesn't mean that the kitchen is free from various bacteria or viruses. It's just that the eyeball test shows that it's clean, right? So it is always good to have your business test regulated and of course certified before you start the business.
Okay, I think that was very good warm-up where you were given all these questions and you have to answer. But I want to move on because we want to cover, you know, 3 more segments, and the next segment that we have is about marketing and charging price points, right? And we will come back to more legal considerations soon, but for now, this part of our discussion is going to focus on some of the more practical aspects of freelancing from home or cafe, depending on your business. And I'm going to rightly ask Aishah, in your experience, okay, what are some of the thought processes that one will need to have before coming to the right marketing strategy for personal branding? So I would like you to share about your thought processes, and maybe, you know, you can share some examples, you know, some of the experiences you had, and then maybe, you know, trial and error, or you made a lot of mistakes and then you finally found the one that suits you. So share with us your thought processes. And you know, what kind of thinking must our audience have?
Okay, I'll share in 2 parts. The first part is really about marketing, because you want the client to step in your door first. So always say or always present yourself in a way that that is, I guess, attractive to the clients, what the clients are looking for. So at one point of time in my life, I think a lot of clients were looking for UX, even though they don't know what UX is. UX is short for user experience. So I'm not going to explain the details of it. It's basically it's the design of how an app works. And because I was very strong in marketing that, on my website, on my social, and through word of mouth, it did go across. I even gave like free workshops. So because word got around, then people came to me and they're like, "Oh, Aishah, we know you're really good at UX. We want to talk to you and we need your help. But then honestly, at that point of time, the thought process is okay. It's really about understanding the client's issue or problem or what needs to be done. And from there, the thought process is okay. This is my expertise, but what is the actual service that I'm providing? And that part needs to be clear because that is the communication part to ensure that the relationship is strong and that they trust you and that what you are delivering is actually what is being set out at the beginning. So, for example, the client didn't know what UX is and wanted to be educated about that. So I had to spend a lot of time educating what it is, understanding what exactly they wanted to do and really which part of the whole design process is important for them, and to let them know like, okay, based on what you said, it sounds like maybe research is something that needs to be done first before we embark on any kind of development. And then to also let them know, okay, what you need to do, I can only cover one part of it. You need to hire someone else to do like the coding, for example. So even that was communicated at the beginning. So in terms of the thought process or strategy, it's really about, for me, it's really about understanding the requirements of the project and then being able to communicate whether you can service the whole thing or you can only service part of it. And then to be clear with the client about that. And of course, like if the client does say that, okay, we really need the whole project done and I only know you, then there's the opportunity to then bring in partners and get commission out of it. So that is really like, I would say the bulk of the process is really getting to know the client and understanding their problem and what services would be useful for them. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's broad enough to cover different industries, I guess.
I think so too. I think two key points that came out of what you're saying is obviously we need to know what the client wants, and the second is about telling them what we can do and making sure we have that alignment. I can imagine for even home F&B business, right? I mean, just understanding what kind of pastry the client wants for a specific purpose, right? And making sure we explain what's in that pastry, what kind of ingredients are used, does it meet whatever health restrictions that the client may have. So I definitely think what you shared, Aishah, was very useful and is applicable if our friends today would also try to think how it could apply for their situation. So the next, yes,
for the pastry thing, right? So let's say I want brownies. So then the person who makes the brownies, but who's going to put it in a box? Who's going to procure the box? Who's going to put the sticker on the box? Who's going to print the sticker? So is the baker going to do all that? Yeah. So those are some things that need to be clear, what you can do and what you cannot do.
Right. So definitely we need to think about not just the actual deliverable, but also how or the manner of delivering it. So I think we probably might get questions about logistics very soon, because we're talking about delivery of the deliverables or the products or services and the manner that it is being provided to the client. But before we get back to that, let's talk about charging or price points, because I think this is quite important. And you can share with us some tips about how do we come up with that sweet spot on charging or price points. And we are assuming, of course, that the nature of our freelancers job here is one where we can decide on pricing. So this doesn't apply if you're in like Grab or you're in some other logistics where there's a fixed pricing mechanism in place. So if you can make a decision on pricing, can you share with us some tips so that our audience know what they can do?
Okay, so the really short answer to that first, and then I'll elaborate further, is two things. You can charge by the time that you're spending on the work. So it's charging per hour and having that number in your head, like how much am I worth? Am I worth 50 an hour? Am I worth 30, 20, or even higher? And it can be different. Like, for example, my per hour rate for teaching is different from my per hour rate of, putting colors into boxes. So, so it's really about knowing how much you're worth and being very confident about that. And once you set that number, of course, you can ask around, find a market rate, be confident about it, and present it to your client in a way that lets them know. But don't tell them how much. You can tell them how much per hour, but you don't really. You usually have a buffer. Like if you think you can do it in 8 hours, like just charge like 20% more. Typically, you want that buffer just in case you have some creative lull, or when you're baking the thing doesn't come out right. You do want to cater for that. Another way of charging is per project. So if the project says that, okay, I want like, I don't know, 100 brownies, so you just charge for the whole project. You don't really, it's quite difficult to count how much time it takes, right? So it takes a bit of trial and error. Like I did charging per project before. Sometimes I get less than what I'm supposed to get. Sometimes I get more. But once you do a few times, you get the hang of how much you're worth. But definitely check market rate first. And one more thing with regards to charging is also based on the relationship or the commitment from the client. If the client says that I want to work with you for 2 weeks, or I want to work with you for 3 months, or I am willing to commit to getting your services for a whole year, then that if they want to work with you for a longer time and you want to incentivize them to work with you for a longer time, then give them a better rate, like a discounted rate for a longer period. It's good for you because as a freelancer, you do need that cash flow, you do need that stability, and having a long-term client is always useful for that.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier about marking up 20% as a buffer, and this is maybe your rule of thumb, right, when you're deciding what to charge, although it depends on whether you're going to give preferential rates to a client because maybe you know the client and you've worked with them. Okay, so shall we include costs, disbursements, or expenses into that figure? And we have a question here, and also going to ask Sam, so either of you can answer. So as a self-employed person, right, can we claim transport expenses, medical, office equipment costs as business expenses? So can we claim, and then if you tell me you can claim, should we still include that in the cost that you charge to the clients? And if you say you cannot claim, then what is your strategy here to cover these costs?
Okay, so whether something is claimable or not, or deductible or not, right, depends on whether it is viewed by IRAS to be allowable business expenses as opposed to disallowable business expenses. Broadly speaking, allowable business expenses would cover, say, employee staff costs, finance and professional costs, like paying your lawyer to go after the client that did not pay you, for example. Running costs, buying equipment, paying for your COE, advertising costs. The list goes on. There's actually a very detailed and very exhaustive list that is set out on IRAS's website under business expenses. Do refer to that. And of course, do take note as well that depending on what our national interests are at any given point in time, you'll find that IRAS will actually tweak all these requirements. And you might actually find that sometimes things which you thought were deductible are no longer deductible. Yeah. So some doctors found out the hard way because their equipment for LASIK or whatever, apparently at one point it was not deductible anymore. Yeah, through the PIC scheme, that is. Back to you, Amira.
Thanks. Sorry, I was in and out.
No worries. Yeah.
So I caught you at the end, but Aisha, just wondered whether you had anything to add to that about including or not including the costs.
Yeah, so medical is a little bit difficult. Not many clients or contractors want to pay for your medical because you're self-employed, you're supposed to have your own insurance. And that has worked for me. Like in cases where I've been hospitalized, insurance covers for the period of time that I'm not working. So do get yourself insured. What else? With regards to transport and equipment, if it's just for as a designer, it's pretty much just all the markers, boards, post-its, and things like that, and software. All those costs is borne by the client. I will let them know what I need. They get it for me. I will tell them I need like software A, B, C. Give me the licenses to this software in order for me to work. Or I will ask them, does your company have, or what software does your company have access to that I can work with? And it's always like a communication thing. You have to like talk to them and figure out a way to get the work done because it's for the best of their interest as well. With regards to transport expenses, it's usually on a case-by-case basis. Of course, the very humane way is like if you work until so late at night in the office, it's like past 8 p.m., past dinner time, then usually it's not that difficult to ask them to cover for the Grab transport back home.
Okay, so we have one more question, and if we could just get a very, very quick answer so we can move on to the next part on contracts. So the question is about, related to transport, can we get a company van after setting up the home business and claim that cost of procuring the transport in your P&L? This is probably an accounting issue.
Yes, it is. But from what little I remember from my own experiences, you have to see whether it is actually under the claim, whether it is actually considered a capital allowance, or for the matter whether it's considered a legit, a claimable or deductible or allowable business expense, depending on who you ask. I think for a fact, I know that COE for motor vehicles are claimable, but it is a question of whether one would view the van as a capital item or capital asset, which possibly, okay, but again, it really depends. Yeah. And this is probably where I have to put my hands up and say that I don't know enough. Maybe an accountant or tax agent would be in a better position to explain. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we have any more questions relating to, say, tax or accounting, we'll probably try to see if they can be addressed at this session, or maybe we could share who will be the right person for these questions to be addressed subsequently. So just want to go back still to freelancing, because this is the main topic, and we want it is a very broad topic, so it comes from setting up all the way to your IP rights, but and in between there's tax, but let's try to cover as many ground as we can, and we need to move on to the next part on contracts. So we know that we need to have contracts. I'm sure growing up you probably heard is it in black and white? So because of that, we want to know, right, whether or not what should be in the contracts, what kind of clauses you must have, right? And what kind of clauses that you should never give up on, even if you just so badly need that job or that project, right? So let's get started. It's going to be quite legal. so Sam, yay, Sam. So to get our audience, into this legal discussion, in what instances do you think our freelancers can maybe not have a contract because it's so complicated for their project or work? So when which situation is it going to be the least risky or not risky at all?
Okay, thanks, Amira. But with that, I'm given to understand that you are referring it to the context of a written contract, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, guys, fun fact. Contracts can be orally entered into orally. So I could say, hey, Amira, let's go for satay later. And Amira say, ons, So that in itself is a verbal contract. We agree that we will go for satay later, right? So contracts, of course, should be written as far as possible, because there is always this thing with imperfect recollection. Yeah, there's always this thing about she said, he said, and you got scroll through your entire WhatsApp conversation just to look for something that wasn't there or wasn't backed up, So entering into any provision of services or goods where money is exchanged and your livelihood depends on it, without a proper contract is in fact a very silly thing to do. Yeah, of course you can get away with it, if nothing goes wrong, but then again, that's why people buy insurances. Yeah, so today I got very well acquainted with my insurance agent again because of a little car accident. But imagine what it would have been like if I chanced it and did not buy insurance. It would have been worse. So it brings me to that issue, whether to enter into written contracts or not, again, should be looked at as a risk-based analysis. What are the likelihood of default? Okay. What are how likely is that service provider or the subcontractor likely to play you out or perform at subpar level and get you into trouble, right? So it's a whole set of risk-based analysis. So back to my favorite example, if someone makes epok-epok in their home kitchen and sells it to me, I'm not going to insist on a 5-page contract or even a 1-page contract. I'll just say, thank you, Makcik, thank you very much. I'll just pay her the money and take my epok-epok, sit in the corner and quietly eat it, right? So some contracts, low risk, right? Especially if I trust her. I know that she has gotten all her food handler's license. I bought from her before, and guess what? No tummy ache, right? So again, I am still taking a risk, right? This, however, is covered by other social contracts that we have in place, where if she serves me food that causes me to have diarrhea for the next 5 days, and I go into the hospital, she will be in a lot of trouble, right? So that's that social compact there where you don't get people into trouble, you don't kill people with your epok-epoks, So in that sense, maybe risk is not so high. You can actually enter into an oral agreement. Auntie, I give you $5, you give me 10 epok-epok. I wish, right? Maybe $5, $10, I get 5, Maybe it's the other way around. But the point is, it is an oral contract. You cannot run away from contracts. Yeah, sometimes you'll find that a lot of businesses practice this, where they send you electronic quotations with a whole list of terms and conditions set out. That, surprise, or fun fact, depending on how you look at it, it is actually a proper contract. Under the Electronic Transactions Act, it is really possible to have contracts which are written on email or under electronic means, but not on paper, or what we call wet ink. Yeah. So to me, risk-based, okay, make sure that you cover your risk appetite or risk. You do your risk analysis before you decide whether to have paper contract or written contract or not. Yeah, even email is fine, but then that brings another question. What is the level of certainty and thoroughness to your terms, right? So if I say, hey, Amira, we will agree to go and eat satay, but I didn't tell her where. So do you think that is a certain term? It is not. The only thing certain is that I want to eat satay, and she agrees, right? But it doesn't say where we are going. She could be thinking Bedok, I could be thinking Sembawang, right? So that's bad, right? So when you enter into any contracts, whether oral, electronic, or written on paper, make sure you are certain about the terms. Okay, and this is like 4 years of contract law, squeeze into like 5 minutes. There are three things which, of course, is an oversimplification, but there are three things which I feel, from a practical sense, you must cover in any contracts. Okay, subject matter, what are you providing? Okay, and the timeline for the provision. All right, when payment is due, that is very important, right? And the third one is, what is your right to terminate or not provide services? If the pandemic has taught us anything, sometimes, don't wait for the government to tell you when you can claim or cannot claim. Make sure you have that kind of clauses protecting you right at the beginning. Yeah, over to you, Mira.
Thanks, Sam. I'm gonna come back to you on what kind of clauses. I know you were talking about formation of a contract, right? But I'm gonna go a bit more advanced and ask you what kind of clauses needs to be in the contract, right? But let me ask Aishah first before we get to that, because let's have our audience, take some time to process what you just said about formation. So Aishah, just want to know, from a practical perspective, really, right? And I know you have contracts signed in the course of your work. Yes, okay. So from a practical perspective, and I assume you didn't get a lawyer to review, although maybe you asked me some questions. So what kind of commercial or legal clauses you think should be in these contracts, just from your practical experience?
Definitely. It's important to read every single line and fine print in a contract when you get one. Hopefully it's not 10 pages. Hopefully it's only 2-4 pages. But either way, just try to read everything. One of the issues that I came across was not being able, so the clause said you're not able to name the client in any of your materials. You cannot tell them that you've worked with this particular company, not in your website, not in your CV, not in your portfolio. And that was very difficult for me because as a freelancer, your reputation is everything. And every client that you work with is like a badge of honor. Like you would want to have the name of that client on your website, especially if it's a reputable one. But sometimes they just want to take you like a worker and not really want to give you that branding to put like on your own material. So that was a negotiation that I had to work out, like, okay, can I do it in this case and not in this case? Okay, fine, I won't put it on my website, but can I still have it in like my in a CV that I send to other, that means in a closed door, not in a public forum, like in a closed, not in a public forum, but in a closed document. So those were some important things that I, for the sake of my livelihood and business, I had to make sure that I have those terms on the right side of on my side. And another thing was with regards to accidents and emergencies. If I am slated to teach on like this day and day and day, if something happens to me, then what are the damages? Like what would be what would happen to me? And are there any penalties? Who is responsible to find a replacement? Is it the responsibility of the client? Is it my responsibility? All that has to be talked out. And I think those are the two main things. Termination clause, always look at that. Like if suddenly you feel like the relationship is not working out and you wanna, throw in the towel and say, hey, then do you get paid for the work that has been done, even though it's halfway? And also like clauses of like if the delivery of the product is not up to their standard and what is their standard, then is there room for negotiation? Because that had happened to me just once in my whole career, that my delivery was not up to their satisfaction and they didn't want to pay for me for the whole thing, and I had to negotiate to be able to at least pay 50% because of the work done, at least cover my costs, So yeah, those are the few things. Maybe you guys can
just to quickly jump in there. That is one of the things that you must really cover. When payment is due. Subject matter, of course, as I mentioned earlier. What are you providing services for, and when it is due, when performance is due. So maybe for a greater context here, you're looking at, say, maybe for content creators, when you agree to the contract, okay, of course, there's these things with offer and acceptance. It is really about making it legally binding and enforceable. But even so, right, you're looking at ensuring the following clauses that I mentioned: when payment is due, what is the subject matter, okay, and right to terminate. Very important, right? Because if non-payment and it's for a long-term, let's say you're contracted to write a series of 24 blocks, right? And after the third block, you find that you have still not been paid for the first block, and your payment terms are very clear: pay when I post, right? So it becomes clear that someone's trying to ghost you, or they're trying to take advantage of you. So what you ought to do right now is to check through your contract, make sure that you have a right to terminate, because that non-payment can be treated as a breach. So this is why there are certain things which you can do without, even about, this whole thing about the right to or the ownership, or as the laws have recently changed, that copyright ownership over the copyrights, right? Who owns it, and what happens to it? All these, in a way, are secondary, okay, and meaningless if you are paid already. If you're not paid, of course, then it becomes important, because you can hold back on it. You can maybe give it to someone else or make full use of it on your own terms, right? But at the end of the day, okay, no matter what sector or what industry you're in, there are three main ideas, okay? Subject matter, okay, when payment is due, and right to terminate. So if you cover these three, I say you're good for it. But again, writing a contract is like risk-based. Okay, so let me give you a quick example here. If you develop a headache and it's not because you just took your booster, right? Would you run to the doctor straight away? Probably not, right? You'll probably, okay, let me just observe it. Maybe it's a muscle strain or whatever. I'll just lie in bed motionless, pop a few Panadols and see what happens, right? Or if you know your body well enough, oh, I'm dehydrated. I spent the whole night drinking and now I'm dehydrated. I need to drink something, water preferably. So you know your own body and you adopt this risk-based approach to it. However, if the headache doesn't go away, then okay, your solutions are not working, and that's when you ought to see a doctor. So a lawyer is just like a doctor, but for your contracts. Yeah, so you can draft, and you can probably, if you know your business well enough, where the ins and outs, where the pain points are, you can get away with it, okay? But if you are dealing with something that is not your core expertise, and you don't know if you know enough or don't know what you don't know, then perhaps it is a good idea to seek out your friend who is practicing, or maybe just do a friendly chat with somebody, and figure something out. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so we have just one last part on contracts before we're going to have Q&A later on anyway, but I want to deal with, like preemption, right? Because, these are things we think about, and I suppose for our friends who are thinking of becoming a freelancer, they're going to start thinking, okay, I need to come up with some standard contracts that I can use with my clients. Okay, but for some of us who are not yet in the business and we're thinking about it, right? And we're talking to friends, should we sign some contract, maybe like a non-disclosure among friends that came when we did a brainstorming session to start this home-based business. So no ideas have been firmed up, but we've got some very bright bulbs. So potentially there's going to be something interesting coming up from the brainstorming session. So should we sign an NDA?
Yeah, I have a very interesting idea here. Queen Bee says, if you like it, put a ring on it. Okay, so if you think that your idea is the bomb, right? Okay, please build a paper fence around it, right? By that, I mean have a contract protecting your rights. If you think that nobody in the known civilization has done it before, then please get your friends to agree to the non-disclosure. Yeah.
Aishah, any thoughts?
Every single client that I meet, even before the work is done, even in the briefing, in them sharing about what the project is about, is NDA is quite common. But for discussions around ideas, not really, because in the startup world, ideas are cheap. So it's really whether or not you execute on them. It's usually those who have started executing, then they would usually ask to sign an NDA.
Yep. For freelancers who are sharing ideas or proposals with clients, right? I think it's important for you to make sure that you get paid for that part of the services. Even if you are not, make sure that there is some understanding that if they do not proceed, then there must be some kind of a admin fee chargeable, right? At least get some money out of it.
Yeah, I've been burned by that before, Sam.
Yeah.
I spent 10 hours writing up a proposal, and then you know what the client said? The client said that, oh, thank you so much for your proposal. I think we're good on our own. Like, we can do this.
Yeah, and they are usually the bigger ones. They are usually the bigger clients or prospective clients, Yeah.
Right. I can see, this topic, this theme of proprietary rights, right, is just bubbling under. And this gives us a very natural progression to our last part, the last segment, which is on IP issues. Okay, so intellectual property rights, and every freelancer should be, most, I guess, if not every, should be concerned about IP rights and IP issues. I'm just thinking, if you're a tuition teacher giving private classes, right? You came up with the, exam questions or essay questions. That's proprietary, isn't it? So unless of course you copied it from somewhere else. Yeah, but more so if you're in the creative industry, like Aishah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this topic, and we're going to look at perspectives from creative and non-creative industry. So we're not going to be discussing IP in too much detail, and I do believe there is a separate session just focusing on IP, and you should sign up for that as well. But we want to talk about IP issues that are relevant for a freelancer, and specifically, what can we do to protect ourselves, and what can we avoid, right? So do's and don'ts. So Sam, I'm going to ask you, because it's going to be legal. I need you to give like a 2-minute mini lecture here on just give us a quick overview of the different IP rights.
Sure. Okay.
And tell us, creative industry like writers, designers, artists versus someone in non-creative industry, for example, maybe home baker. What kind of IP rights will they deal with?
Okay, sure. Thanks. Now, just very quickly, intellectual property or IP, okay, IP actually refers to the creations of the mind, right, such as inventions, artistic literary works, and certain designs, etc. So these are intangible assets that can be commoditized or commercialized for your business. All right, and that is where the value is. Now, generally speaking, the WIPO, or the World Intellectual Property Office, recognizes 6 different IP rights: your copyrights, patents, trademarks, industrial designs, geographical indications, and trade secrets. So what are these? Okay, copyrights are original expressions. So they are not expressions of facts, but they are expressions of ideas, they themselves are original in the way they express the facts. So for example, if I say the sun rises from the east, that is a fact, right? Or no matter where you are on this planet, it rises from the east. But if you say, doth yon, whatever, I forgot my Shakespeare. It is the east and Julius the sun, arise fair sun, that kind of thing. That is artistic expression, all right? And that, if I lived maybe 700 years ago, that would be protectable. for example, all right? Now, because I will be the first to utter it, right? Patents, on the other hand, protect original inventions or original ideas that they are novel, they are capable of an industrial step, and that are not obvious. So, for example, if I were to lash my Nokia 3210 with my personal digital assistant together and call it a smartphone, it's probably not an invention and not a smartphone. But if I develop something like the iPhone, yeah, then of course, it's integrated, it is an invention. Now, patents can also work for different sectors, like for children's toys, like your Lego blocks were patented up to the 90s. That's when they started doing all this co-branding with movies. And that brings me to the next item, trademarks. Okay, when you co-brand, when your Lego suddenly have Harry Potter, Marvel, right? It means that they are relying on each other's brand to co-brand together. So Lego X Marvel, right? And suddenly, it's so desirable, right? So trademarks are what we would call badge of origins, unique badges of origin. And when the public look at it, they instantly, or they are drawn or brought to that conclusion that this belongs to you, and all goods represented under this logo or this name belongs to you, right? So if I were to say McDonald's, everybody knows what that does and what they represent. Now, industrial designs are a bit trickier. Okay, some people that I know call them the poor man's patents. But again, it is really about what you're trying to protect here. Registered designs in Singapore protect aesthetics relating to design, right? As opposed to the idea of the design, as in the structural or the functional aspects of it. Geographical indications are very interesting. For example, all of us have heard of champagne, right? But do you know that only wines made in the region called Champagne in France can call their bubbly champagne? Everywhere else is just called sparkling wine. Okay, so that is a geographical indication, but it must come from things which are created from that region and unique to that region. So if, for example, I have to set up a, say, Bukit Timah Laksa, right? And I start to claim, fun fact, this is actually an analog of a real case. I claim that I want people to recognize Bukit Timah Laksa as a geographical indication. Well, guess what? IPOS will throw it out, okay, simply because the ingredients that I have sourced are not from Bukit Timah. The wet market doesn't count, okay? So it must be things which are grown on a particular hill on Bukit Timah, nowhere else in the world, only there. Then different story. Then I can say, this is Bukit Timah Laksa because it incorporates that ingredient. Yeah. Last, of course, is trade secrets. What is a trade secret? For example, the formulation that goes into Coca-Cola, right? The formulation that goes into your batter, the precise proportions, okay, for the batter or the dough that you use to make your epok-epok with, or what special ingredients or what kind of lime you add to your sardine to make your sardine epok-epok, right? So, sorry, I love epok-epok. So I have some really good ones recently at Mr. Uncle in Sembawang. So the whole idea behind trade secret is only you know, okay? Only you know. All right, but that can be distinguished. Confidential information, of course, is part of trade secrets. But another type is really this thing called know-how. Okay, and even lawyers struggle to define know-how in the context of confidential information and trade secrets. So know-how is really that whole bank of experience that you have created over the years of doing something. Right? If I'm a product designer, you tell me you want something with wings, I'll tell you immediately, that doesn't work because this product will not be able to structurally handle the wings, right? So that comes from where? Not from head knowledge, in a way it's head knowledge, but not from textbooks, but from that wealth of knowledge, our experience are built over the years. So when you talk about trade secrets, right, it is very important to know what you are trying to talk about, because you can never guard against one person's know-how. So for example, if you have an employee, okay, and you teach the employee how to make the best apple in town, or how to draw the nicest things, or to take the best photographs, okay, that person leaves with that skill. And there's no way you can prevent that person from making his use of his skills to actually make a living, right? So a master photographer will always be a master photographer, no matter what camera he uses. It would be unfair to force him to drive a Grab, because that's not his skill set. And the law does recognize this right in Singapore, at least, of every person's right to livelihood using your own skills. Yeah, okay. In Singapore, we also recognize plant variety rights, but I think for the context of this discussion, it's not very relevant. So in a nutshell, what IP rights apply to your business actually depends on the kind of protection you are seeking. In most cases, trademarks will apply because trademarks are badges of origin for businesses, okay, representing the goods and services. Sometimes you'll find that if your business actually doesn't require you to create creative content, things like copyright and industrial designs sort of don't matter much. Yeah. On the other hand, if your clients are relying on your very specific skill set, like maybe you're the Liam Neeson of creative or PR, there is no secret there. Okay, but that know-how is so valuable. Okay, that you can just walk away with it. But again, there might be trade secrets involved because of the things that your clients tell you, or maybe because of the way you put things together, that could in itself be a trade secret. Yeah, back to you, Amira. I think I went a bit too detailed. It's a rabbit hole, It's a rabbit hole. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you about IP registration, but
yes.
I think let's.
I can do a very quick one.
You can? Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay,
IP registration doesn't apply to every single type of IP. Okay, of the list I mentioned, trade secrets cannot be registered. Copyrights are not protected by registration, but by fact, by use, okay, and by publication date. What you can really register in Singapore are patents, trademarks, industrial designs, and geographical indications. Okay. So registration, Sam. Yes.
So tell us when would be a good time to look into, registration for whatever we can register. And you said trademarks, patents, industrial designs for our freelancers starting out his or her business. When is a good time?
Okay, I'm going to be very brutal here and say that you must be able to afford it, because some kinds of IP rights ain't cheap. Okay, for example, if you are to register a patent, the whole process may cost you upwards of 15,000 Singapore dollars just to patent something in Singapore. But guess what? We rely on a worldwide priority search, so you have to register elsewhere as well. Because in the US, they don't care if you register in Singapore, you must be registered in the US, or a patent must be granted in the US. So it really depends on your trade, okay? But my approach is pragmatic. Look at what you can afford. Some things like trademarks, right? You can choose not to register immediately because the history of use does, in a way, give you that protection. You can either apply under the thought of passing off, okay, an action under thought of passing off to protect your rights, or alternatively, you could wait till you have gained some traction, made some money, and then approach someone to file the trademarks for you. Yeah. At the end of the day, if somebody uses your trademark while you are using it, it is always possible to issue lawyers' letters, and ask them to cease and desist. There is a very interesting episode of Goody Feed recently, which talks about lawyers' letters. So you might want to check that out. No relation, not my clients also. But, they have some good content there. So I guess it really depends on what your appetite is. Yeah, and of course, there's always this urge to protect everything first, set it up very nicely, but maybe sometimes there's some value in going cheap, fast, and dirty. Just get it done. Start your project, make some money before you think about how to spend it. Yeah. Back to you, Amira.
Thanks, Sam. Sounds like we should think about whether we have the budget for it, and also depending on what industry we're at, right? Whether it makes sense to register, and also depends on, I guess, what kind of logo, right? How are we using it and all this?
Yeah.
So Aishah, I just want to ask you one last part on IP, right? So in your line of work, and because you're in the creative industry, and I heard you just now, you had that IP issue thing, but proprietary, because you did a proposal and then they didn't pay you for it. Okay, so do you have a positive example that you feel that would be useful for our audience, and they can adopt this, they can learn from it, and also follow what you did?
A positive example. Well, I kind of got away with, I wouldn't say a copied design, because, good artists copy, but great artists steal. But don't quote me on that. I saw that online. I was coming up with a collateral, just a marketing collateral, and there were like little characters inside of it, and they were in silhouettes. So those silhouettes were actually silhouettes that I got inspired from online. There was this huge collection of silhouettes, and I was just like trying to find like the exact one that really matches with my theme and stuff like that. And then I just traced around it and made a little bit of edits and then put it in my design. And truth be told, like, I was questioned. My client was like, are these ripped from the internet, like specifically those silhouettes? And I'm like, yeah, but I traced it out myself, and I repurposed it for like a whole new design. And you can't look at the design just from like those silhouettes alone. This silhouette is just part of like a bigger landscape that I'm doing. So I was very confident that I wasn't breaching any kind of copyright, or breaching any kind of in a way stealing other people's work. And in that situation, the onus was on the client to check. If the client, for example, if baking, if the client says that, how come your cupcake whatever icing looks exactly the same as like Julie Bakes or something like that? I mean, sometimes
cupcakes look the same. All look the same.
Exactly, they all look the same. So if you talk to me about a silhouette of a man or a woman with hair or without hair, or like with spiked up hair, they all look the same. And I've done enough changes to it to make it look like my own. So yeah, I wouldn't say I got away with it, but I sure didn't get into any trouble.
Yeah, that whole thing about personal image rights, that is another rabbit hole that we probably don't have time to go into today. We'll have to leave it to our colleagues for the other talk.
Okay.
I think on what Sam said also, like, when you're doing it for so long, like some things just come so natural, and you have, like, for example, if you work through like a few clients, and let's say for client, the client from last year, you did this, and then when the client of this year has something similar, doing something similar, then you can't be like, okay, whatever I did from last year, I cannot use the same thing for this year. You wouldn't want to restrict yourself as a skills-based person, right? You gained that skill from last year, so just use the same skill again for this year. Like if you want to carve your chair in a certain way, or you want to bake with a certain ingredient, or there's no way that anyone can take away what's inside your head.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, cut our very engaging discussion on IP, and move on to our Q&A segment. We have, actually just a couple of minutes, but if you have any more questions, please feel free to submit it through the Q&A icon on your screen. And one of the earlier questions we had, which is quite related to what we were talking about, in terms of contracts. The question really is, how can one guard against a customer who asks for a refund many months after taking delivery of, the freelancer's product, and threatens to badmouth the freelancer if we don't give in. So what steps can we take to protect ourselves from this type of negative situation? Open to both of you.
Oh, frankly, it really depends on the price point. If it's something worth $500, you got to ask yourself, is it really worth your time and effort to deal with a client like that? I would sooner just blacklist that client, maybe just not deal with this person anymore, right? Rather than spend any more precious time going after this guy, right? So it's really your risk appetite. Of course, if it comes down to this issue about it being like in the millions, then of course, fight for it, right? It's worth the fight. At least by the time you are done fighting and you win, you are not too much out of pocket. And whatever you get, it'll still be worth your while, because when it comes to that kind of situations, and Amira would agree with me, it can be expensive. Yeah.
Okay. Any thoughts from you, Aishah?
I think I mentioned before there was one client that wasn't happy with my work and didn't want to pay at all. So I was able at a point to negotiate to pay half. Yeah. So just, yeah, you have to be paid something. You can, if someone.
But if you have been paid and it asks you for a refund because they're not happy or they purport to be not happy.
I mean, after so many months and ask for a refund, that's weird. I would just like, yeah, I would just not care. Like, yeah, it's okay. You lose one client, but you can gain 10 more. It's fine.
Yeah. Very, very early in my firm's history, right, we encountered this client who shall not be named. The client actually ordered a piece of work from us on an urgent basis, but after the work was delivered, his mother, who is also his business partner, came to us and say, "I never approved it. This is not going ahead. We are not paying you." We learned a very important lesson that day, which is, again, if you like it, put a ring on it. But in this context, right, it is about collecting some kind of deposit, making sure in your contract that your terms of payment or terms for deposit or terms for beginning service is very clear. Okay, there's no retrospective enactment of the satisfaction, for example, right? So all these things can be spelled out very clearly. Again, depending on your risk appetite and depending on your own personal experiences. So sometimes, my clients or even myself, we find that, oh, this client did not do right by us. And we learn that lesson. We put it into our hearts. And before you know it, it comes out into the contract to guard against future clients who may be tempted to behave that way. Yep.
Okay, so we have very little time left, and I wanted to give the both of you about 30 seconds each to basically share with us some quick one do and one don't in a freelancing journey. Like, this is the top thing you want our audience to walk away and remember if they can't remember everything else. Aishah or Sam?
I'll go
30
first.
seconds each.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in freelancing, you have to know that you don't work 5 days a week. You only work 4 because one of the days is marketing. And sometimes, even if, let's say, you're a wedding caterer, sometimes you may even have to sponsor one whole wedding and then to get yourself out there. Always know that, when you go into freelancing, there's always that work in the beginning that may take some time for you to get to be trusted, to get your followers and stuff like that. So that's something to consider, especially because 75% of you guys are thinking about it. So there is some investment.
Sam?
Okay, a great man by the name of Paul Scholes once said this. Why do we need football agents? All I needed was a good lawyer and a good accountant. So surround yourselves with the right kind of people to help you grow your business or to take care of your needs. Yeah, that's all I have to share.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
very much, guys. We have to bring our session to a close, and definitely hope that you have better insight as to the legal and practical areas to consider when freelancing from home. And please do scan the QR code that you're seeing on the screen, or visit our website also on the screen to find out more about the other webinars under Law Awareness Weeks at CDC 2021. And after this webinar ends, a feedback form will be shown in your browser for your completion. So we'll be very grateful if you could just take a couple of minutes to complete the form so that we can improve our webinars. And of course, you can put in more questions if you suddenly think of one. And thank you once again, Samuel and Aishah, for sharing your very valuable insights. Thank you to all our participants for joining us today on both Facebook as well as Zoom, and wishing you a very great weekend ahead. Thank you.